All right, guys, we have here today beautiful Margaret. She is a Remedy Academy student, and I wanted to sit with Margaret today and find out a bit about her history. I know only actually a little bit, so this is for me as much as it's for you guys. But Margaret, I know that you did start more in the mainstream medical industry. So tell me about that. Did you start in, and then what led you to homeopathy?
I've been led into homeopathy because of my family background. I grew up in the bush. Uh, we rarely saw doctors. My grandmother used to say, you either spend your money on good food or at the doctor's. Uh, she used lots and lots of old country remedies, which were very effective in treatment. And I think I saw a doctor twice. One of those is when I was hit in the head with a sickle, which required potentially um, a stitch, but it was put together with tape, thank goodness.
I love it. Where did you grow up?
Up near Kingaroy. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow, I love it. And so was your grandma Australian?
No, she came from Ireland. Yes,
Right. So she had the natural remedies. She was across it. Was she ever
yes.
into homeopathy or?
Yes, well, in fact, she was when I think about it, because we actually had the teething remedies.
Yeah.
Um, we used sulfur. In fact, flowers of sulfur, my girlfriend and I, keep our complexions pure, clear. We actually used to have Ryavita with honey and sulfur uh, to keep our complexions clear.
So
Yeah.
you were sort of microdosing to an extent sulfur, almost a homeopathic principle, a bit of this like cures like. We know
Yes.
sulfur has a huge affinity for the skin. For anybody who's listening, sulfur was the first remedy that I was ever prescribed. I can't say my skin is as stunning as Margaret's, but it literally for me it pushed out a dormant, viral load. All of these cold sores came up to the surface, expressed, and then I never had another cold sore again. So, guys, big affinity for the skin, but yeah, okay. So you were dosing with that. All right. So you grew up with that. And then what led you into becoming a nurse? And you tell me about your work story
Yeah.
because you were quite a prominent figure, in these recent years in the medical industry. Tell me about that.
Yeah. Well, initially, I actually wanted to be a vet. My mother said, "Don't be ridiculous. Can you imagine yourself at 40 climbing over stockyard rails?" So she said to be a doctor. I thought, no, I don't want to be a doctor. They only deal with dead people, which was probably a fear of mine at that stage.
Yeah.
Uh, then an uncle who was actually a doctor said, no, be a nurse because you can travel the world, go into clinical education or management. Little did I know that he was actually supported by his wife, who was a nurse, while he did his anesthesiology in London. So he had ulterior motives for actually telling me that at that stage.
Yeah. Right. And so then you got into nursing. And then what was that like in recent years? And when did you decide maybe homeopathy is something that
Yeah.
you wanted to study?
Well, I was really fortunate because I actually started in the old system, which I absolutely loved. We had paired theory and practical together, which suited my learning of uh, um,
Style.
style.
Yeah, just like
Yeah,
learning by doing,
yeah,
that sort of
yeah,
apprenticeship style.
yeah. And how I learnt was I used to take notes and then just decipher the scribble
Yeah.
and then actually write it out again.
Mm,
So then it was imprinted in my brain,
mm,
and has lasted me from then to there. I can actually
mm,
draw on that knowledge base. I also did case studies,
mm.
which so I could remember Mrs. Jones in ward with, she had pneumonia, and actually what we did, and we looked at in those days as the biopsychosocial and spiritual needs of our patients. So it was really a
Holistic
holistic
nursing.
approach at that time.
Mm,
We just had wonderful educators that had that ear quotient and instill that into into the nursing students. Yeah.
So these days, obviously, I imagine the landscape for being a nurse and the parameters through which you can operate, there's not much room for looking after their psycho, spiritual, social aspects that we know are such a huge contributor to their health and well-being. From the feedback I get, I have a lot of friends who are nurses. Obviously, we have a lot of students. We have a few hundred, all up, who will be graduating as homeopaths who are nurses or medical staff. And I think the red tape, what it has become, and losing that personal nature, right? That human to human contact with all of the regulations and all of the expectations on our nurses with their charts, like tick this, do that, da da da, get someone else to sign this off. We've spent so much time focusing on that rigmarole, perhaps in an attempt to keep people safe from a lot of the over drugging and, the inappropriate things that happen. But in that, with all of those checks and balances, how much time is there truly to connect with, to lay a hand on, and even, really be there with your patient? Is that what you were finding, or?
Yes, we actually did a subject called Nursing Arts, which was 30% of our course. And when you were interviewed for intake, you had to actually display that you had that quality. So that was basically, in those days, it was, they say it was 5% of the population possessed that skill.
Really? And
So,
empathy,
yes,
loving care,
yeah,
nurturing,
yeah,
that's what they were looking
yes,
for.
yeah,
Wow, and
yeah,
and did they turn people away if they really thought you are not suited
yes,
for this career?
yes,
My gosh, everyone's gonna be
yes.
wondering, where did you study?
Um, I initially started at Royal Brisbane Hospital,
Yeah,
which was the top training hospital at that particular
yeah,
time, and then it seesawed across to other hospitals,
yeah.
depending on who was the leader and who was working in the education sector. Yeah, so
Wow.
yeah.
And in that, I've got a few family members who still work at the Royal. Some of them are ICU nurses, and that is incredible. That is so beautiful for me to hear, to be honest. Because how many years ago was that you were studying?
That was really last century. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
I'm a bit of a um,
Yeah.
dinosaur, so to speak.
You are not a dinosaur, you are a weapon. And I know that during COVID as well, obviously the political climate in the hospitals and medical system, that was also rough. And I know that you, with that empathy and that care, you're definitely in that 5%, because I know you went out on a limb, doing support consults for those who felt backed into a corner, and you were just trying to love and assist and support everybody, through that. What was that time like?
It was quite stressful for uh, the nursing staff and also for patients, uh, other other team members, basically right down to our cleaners and wardsmen who'd actually pop in and knock on the door and say, "What do you think about this?" Uh, I actually looked at the statistics and thought, I've got more luck at winning Gold Lotto than I am at catching this. It actually flew in the face of the science that we were uh, socialized in, all of the research that I had done over many years, and what we were actually taught.
Yeah,
Yes.
I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. And so then you did enroll in Remedy Academy. Tell me what that journey was like, stepping into study. Did you have any limiting beliefs? Were you just like, nope, that's what I want? What was the process like for you?
I've always been interested in health as opposed and maintaining health,
Mm.
health promotion versus letting someone uh,
Prevention rather than,
prevention
yeah.
rather than yeah.
Proactive rather than
Yeah.
reactive. Amen. Amen. So you're always into that. And then homeopathy just called you.
Yes, yes. I had an ethical dilemma or a moral dilemma when, in fact, there was quite an incongruency with the research that I'd done, and what was being said in the media didn't support what I knew. Yeah.
Hmm. and then you found your way here. What has studying been like, working with your cases? What do you feel about homeopathy as a modality for the future? Like, as someone so medically trained, what do you feel it has to offer the world?
I think, from my perspective, I was fortunate to be the first mental health nurse seconded uh, to do my actual training at a rather large institution, and I there saw that lots and lots of the disease process actually started in the stress and the mental health of issues, and you could actually see uh, why people actually develop physical diseases in lots and lots of instances. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So you knew that was the root.
yeah,
So addressing that with
yeah,
homeopathy, you felt really
yeah,
comfortable with that you're doing a
yeah.
good.
And I could actually see with research that looking at quantum physics, uh, magnetism, that we have the propensity to actually change how um, disease
Manifest, yeah.
actually manifests. Yeah,
Amen. Amen. If you were to create something for the future, if you were given, the keys to be able to create uh, something for the people, what sort of model would that look like? Obviously, you've been in both worlds. You understand the demands, the ups and downs of, a lot of different systems. Tell me, what do you think the world needs in order for us to sort of overcome the chronic disease and the real struggles that we're currently finding ourselves in?
yeah.
What would you create?
Well, I think if we look historically, we can see that a lot of the diseases that we're encountering didn't really exist to the propensity that they do today. I grew up in a freezing, freezing cold environment, and I only knew one person that had asthma. So consequently, I felt there were other uh, other issues that are causing that. And I hark back again to my great grandmother, who said, good food, fresh, be out in the sunshine, um, good water, sleep patterns, and growing up in a friendly family environment. She relayed to me about when there was a diphtheria epidemic when my mum was growing up. It circled them, and she aspires that to using common salt water gargles, and also they used to have to wear a block of camphor, so uh, they
Yeah,
never had any of the diseases
yeah.
and grew up quite healthy. Yeah.
So keep it holistic as much as possible.
Yes.
Lean on, our emergency medical stuff. What part do you feel they have to play? What does our current medical model, that's the mainstream established system, what do you think they do
I,
have to offer? What do they do well?
yeah, I think in this day and age, trauma is an emergency surgery, at the pinnacle, and those treatments. Uh, we need to actually continue to look at that scientifically and promote further. Whereas the chronic disease, I think, has manifested itself over many, many years of the food supply isn't what we used to have. We grew up and we had meat, vegetables, uh, dare I say, raw milk, which is a no-no in this day and age. And I actually used to make our own butter. So it was,
This is the
I
tips and
think
tricks.
that that kept all of my siblings and my family healthy. And they really had to visit the doctor either. However, if there was an issue, there was a great GP that we could actually access, which was, yeah.
Yeah, that's what you want, and a good
Yeah.
relationship with them.
Yes.
Yeah, that
Yep.
depth of knowledge. I love that. And it's so true. When we talk about the pillars of health, right? A lot of people in even the holistic world, a lot of it is like this supplement, you need this and this constant, needing of things. And really, if you are not focusing on those wholesome pillars, right? Good food, good sleep, it seems overrated. People are looking for a magic pill beyond that. But the reality is, a great deal of chronic disease would resolve just under living in that wholesome way.
Yes,
And
exactly.
then one step up from that, yes, we acknowledge some people are born with distorted energy, these traumas, these emotional things. We use homeopathy to remove that. That is the next pillar. We're in between. We're not even the first line. The first line is basic good life hygiene. No homeopathy in the world can overcome somebody who wants to just feed their body toxins or lather it on their skin, all of these toxic chemical causing things. Like, we still are a biological machine. We're powerful, but like, our body has limitations through which it can operate at. So then you've got the homeopathy, and then we would say for the emergency trauma, life-saving medicine. I mean, some of the things that they can do, these kids who are born, and maybe the stomach is literally born in the wrong spot, or it's like slightly outside. And it's what they can do in surgery is phenomenal. And it's so something to be heralded. There are a lot of drugs I think that are wonderful, things like pain relief and all of that. So, yeah, the integration, but everything knowing its place. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Anything else that you would like to share, Margaret? If anybody said, "Look, I'm looking at changing my career," people who are looking to study homeopathy, did you feel nervous at all signing up, changing your career? What was it like for you?
Not at all, because I think we're going into the new century. People need to actually look at different modalities, different different ways in how we do our work. We've seen during COVID that people were working from home. I think a lot of healthcare professionals can actually draw on their knowledge, clinical knowledge base, to uh, work alternatively, uh, provide themselves uh, an alternative or a main income stream that fits in with family life, and there isn't the stress of traveling, children having to be put in to get daycare at some ungodly hour, picked up. They don't have the mums and dads today. I really take my hat off to them. They are just on the treadmill day in, day out. And I think this provides an option for people to change their lifestyle and become more community orientated. And we can hark back to the good old days of having supportive community, because with the nuclear family now, like I was fortunate because my grandmother lived with us and she assisted. So when mum was so busy, she was able to uh, listen to our homework and spelling, and while she was peeling the veggies, etc. Yeah, so it just had a fantastic lifestyle. And what I had, I would love to see that my children and my children's children do have that opportunity. They're not just running uh,
Good.
ragged. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
You're speaking my language. I really think that intergenerational living is the future. And I was very blessed. My grandparents were around a lot. They retired in their 40s. And so it was just, they were our life. We saw them all the time. And that support of the family, it's going back to the way that society functioned before we really started to just tinker with it. It worked for, generations before. Lastly, we can finish on this, and it's something that I'd love to do without nurses. And you were talking about um, people creating, a more wholesome life, right? More flexibility, more community oriented. I love all of that. we actually want to get an initiative, homeopathy for nurses and first responders. So we've had a lot of military people. Of course, there's a lot of PTSD, but we've been finding even in things like ICU, the nervous systems of a lot of our nurses, the things that they have to see, the things that they treat, it is intense. It is a lot for a human being to be privy to. And I was going to ask you after the interview, but just putting it out there that we fully want to promote, through Remedy. It's a free service, right? That people who are overwhelmed, whether they are nurses, military, police, paramedics, our paramedics, I think, see some of the most horrific situations, what they walk into, and what they're expected to cope with. And I feel that our medical system, we need to be well as providers to actually be able to love and influence in that way. Like you are radiant, like you are such a good, nurturing, loving energy that being around you is healing on itself. A lot of our nurses, like they are down and out, they are beaten down. And so, even if we, as natural therapists, as homeopaths, start to hold them, help release some of that trauma, and then we just see that flow on effect, through people to people. So I love that. But thank you for all of your amazing work. I know you didn't go into detail. I know how much you have done behind the scenes to advocate for people, to protect people. I love hearing about your wholesome career and your training, because what that says to me is that it was not always this way. There was a time when nursing was so much more holistic. And I think the nurses these days, if they were given the liberty, so many of them, that's what they want as well. But it's that the orders come from above, the time, the check sheets. And yeah, I was talking to a medical doctor last week, and he said to me, he was really upset actually, because they obviously do audits in practices, and they're saying, no, we need you doing more of this checklist. And his pushback was, I already feel like a robot. You already make me do all this stuff. I'm already behind the computer screen. I hardly get a chance to even like touch, my patients on the back and say, hey, how you going? And it seems like with all of the requirements, all these regulations, they really are taking out the human aspect of healing, which we know cannot be done. But thank you so much, Margaret. You're a treasure.